Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. This week we're taking a look at the all-new 2018 Toyota CHR, their new entry in the fun, highly styled, small SUV class, competing against vehicles not directly but very closely like the Honda HR-V, the Mazda CX-3, Kia Soul perhaps, even something that Mini Cooper might offer you. And so we're going to take a good look at it inside and out, take it for a drive, and tell you what it's really like to live with. Now obviously, before we get out on the test drive, we've got to talk about styling here because, well, look at it. This is the CHR. Styling and presentation is really, as we're going to really discuss here, what this vehicle's all about. It's about the presentation. And this one right here, I got to tell you, I absolutely love this color combination. As you can tell, I tried to dress as close to it as I could. This is what they call radiant green with the optional white top. Now, this is a color combination that you can do with the white top. It comes with dark blue, a dark red, and this particular signature color. This color only available with the white roof. I've had a lot of people in the week ask me about it, so that's why I'm pointing it out. I gotta tell you, when I first saw this vehicle, it seemed a little, wow, that's kind of different. But the more I've really sort of looked at this, it to me is the best embodiment of the current Toyota styling that they're running across all of their products right now, their latest products. It's almost like this is the car they really put those styling elements together on and said, okay, now we're going to take bits and pieces of this and spread it out across the other line, the Camry, the RAV4, some of those other cars they build. And so this is like the prototype when it comes to their styling language, I think. And if it's not, it sure seems like it. So right to the business of it, what you can see here is you've got what's becoming a familiar Toyota face, but this is very extroverted. The headlights here on this one, we've got HID halogen headlights, but we've got daytime running lights that have a nice LED light up element there that are very attractive, very high tech looking. So the fact that we don't have high end headlights here, not a big deal. In the daytime, they're going to give you that sort of razzmatazz that most people really look to those things for. Anyway, the reality is the halogen headlights tend to work better than a lot of the latest whiz-bang xenon and LED headlights that are currently on the market with a lot of vehicles. No really big grille here. This is sort of eschewing that with a nice body color, a facial. I mean, that's basically what's going on here. There is a grille element down below in the lower fascia by that air dam. This is an XLE. This comes in two trim grades. You've got XLE and XLE Premium. And so what that means here as far as styling is down here, we do not have fog lights on this one. If you step up to the Premium trim grade, you will get the fog lights here. Now on all of these, standard 18-inch alloy wheels, 18x7 and pretty good size rubber, 225 section. They're pretty big, so whether you get the XLE or XLE Premium, that's what this is going to look like. Coming around the side and really looking at it from this angle, this is where the styling really goes further than what we saw up front, and that starts with a Coke bottle shape that this clearly has, something accentuated very strongly by that lower black plastic cladding. It really sort of curves up in there and gives you that squeezed center section there, and it's also accentuated by this roof line, highlighted even more by the fact we've got this two-tone color combination. And looking down the side here, you can see the roof line and the window line here fits into that coupe nomenclature. Now clearly we've got four doors, not a coupe in that respect, but when it comes to the styling, that's really what they are going after there. And you'll note here we've got a very interesting door handle up there. You reach in there and you pull that. It looks like it might be a fingernail breaker, but it's actually very easy on the fingers. Up on the roof here, this particular car has a dealer installed roof rack. I'm not sure why they do that to our press cars, but in this case it was a good thing to see that that is available. So if you do have accessories like a bike, a surfboard, skis, whatever, you can see that that is available and they work pretty well. I think a nice blonde colored surfboard up here would be a pretty cool picture myself. But back here, as you can see, we've got a really long spoiler that comes out here. That is standard equipment, not an option. And it really just looks good. It sort of has that cap on backwards look like we've seen on some Minis here in the past few years. I like it. And when you get back here, this rear quarter actually has a lot of three-dimensional form here. It's got hips, and that rear quarter and bumper really kick out there. There's some shape to it, and that's accentuated by these LED taillights that just pop, literally pop out of the structure. I like it. And well, now it's time to move inside and talk about that. As evidenced by the exterior styling, you're also going to find here in the interior that Toyota's tired of being called boring. We've got a completely new take on the dashboard from Toyota here with this sweeping design, and you can see that here in the top we've got a nice big soft pad that just sort of floats there, and then the center trim here just has this sort of floating wing design going on, and in the center, of course, a very prominent tall center screen layout. The console flows down here with a lot of artistic flair going on, and it has a nice seating position. When you're sitting here, very much like an SUV of modern, can't see a lot of the hood, but you do have a higher seating position here than you'd have in a standard car. You've got a nice commanding view in that way. It's comfortable. Here in the XLE as well as what you're going to find in the XLE Premium. We've got cloth seats. These are manually adjustable. If you do go up to that XLE Premium, those are heated seats, and the driver's seat has 8-way as opposed to 6-way adjustment, which we have here. The steering wheel does have a tilt and telescope adjustment, and it's leather covered, has controls here for all your audio, as well as the center screen between those two dials. That center screen, a 4.2-inch LCD screen, completely customizable with a lot of information sets, as well as some settings you can go in there and do, and some of those have to do with the Toyota Safety Sense program that's part of this vehicle. Standard equipment across the board. On the center stack, you're going to find this has climate control, also standard equipment, so not the standard 3-dial heating and air conditioning setup. Very modern. You set the temperature, and it's all push button controlled with a nice LED readout there. In the matter of storage, here in the center console, you've got a big cubby right up front that's good for a phone. There's a USB port and an auxiliary port right next to that. The cup holders are actually split. You've got one up front, one back here, and they're very deep, so you can put the big gas station type cups in there, and they're going to fit quite well. Here in the center console, you've got a nice deep bin, although it isn't too large. Down in the doors, you do also have mat pockets down there, which are pretty sizable, but storage still for what they call a small SUV, not really top of class. Materials in here, very impressive. Now, even though this is sort of an economy price car, and the materials in here do fit that mold, they've done a good job of really spicing up this interior to make it special and to give it some flair. And I'll start with these door panels here. What looks like a nice patterned cloth is actually plastic. It's a hard plastic. Now, in a lot of cars, I probably complain about that, but because they've gone the extra mile to sort of jazz it up and make it look like something a little bit more upscale, it actually passes for good. But here on the dash, the materials are of a very high quality. You have a nice piano black applique across the dash that has a little bit of a metallic to it, so when it does get dust on it, that really doesn't become noticeable. And the soft touch trim up here, very nice. And there is soft touch here on the door panel where your arm touches, as well as here on the console. So they've done a good job of making sure the touch points in here do feel of quality. One thing missing, you might have noticed, is a push button start. Got a key hanging right here. That is on the XLE. If you step up to the XLE Premium, that is part of that package, a push button start. I am a little bit surprised that they did it this way, because often it costs more to offer something both ways, especially in a low volume vehicle like this. Other little surprises abound from a design perspective. Up here in the headliner, they've actually put some design elements in there, just molded into the headliner to give you a little bit of an extra flair that ties in with some of the design elements we see in the door panels and on the exterior. I love that. Your rear passengers are going to sit back here, and they're going to think they're in a compact car, because really that's what this is, if we're honest. It just happens to have a high profile. They call it a small SUV, but it's a small car. And so how that really demonstrates itself is a low seating position back here. As you can see, I'm not getting any support here underneath my legs. I'm perched up here with my knees. Not a terrible thing, oddly enough. That can be an uncomfortable position, but in this car it's not so terribly bad. The good news is there is some good leg room, and the headroom back here, in spite of its coupe roof line, I have about 3 inches above my head, so that's actually a very good thing. These seats have a little bit of bolstering, a little bit of shape to them, so you don't feel like you're sitting on a big flat bench. There is 3 across seating back here, although I would imagine it would be pretty tight. In the way of amenities, there are a few back here. You've got cup holders built into the doors, a nice touch. When it comes to listing what there isn't back here, we do not have vents back here for your rear passengers, nor is there a fold-down armrest. Now, these seats, of course, do fold down in a 60-40 split like you'd expect in any hatchback or a small SUV. Because this does have this coupe roof line that has a nice rake there in the back, as you saw on the outside, The actual cargo space here on the inside is a little bit less than you might expect once you do get those seats down. You've got 36 cubic feet of storage space back there when the seats are down. Pretty flat load floor, as you can see. And the good news, as always to me, especially in anything called an SUV, is that we do have a spare tire back there, not an emergency inflator. Very important, because if you actually use this like an SUV, you're more likely to cut a tire open on a rock or some sharp object out there that's not on the pavement. So always a good thing. When it comes to rating this interior, I'm pretty pleased overall. The materials are of a reasonably good quality and they've been imaginative with the design. That's always very important because you're living in here. Now, this does not have some of the utility you're going to find in competing small SUVs like, say, the Kia Soul, the Honda HR-V, because they have a boxier shape. But this does have a style, and there's always a trade-off for that somewhere along the line, but it's still a pretty good place to be and spend your time. So the interior gets 4 out of 5 stars. On the matter of tech and infotainment, one thing I am a little bit surprised about with the CHR, being that this is a brand new vehicle from the ground up, is that they brought old technology here. And as you can see here, this is a double DIN, sort of an aftermarket style audio system that you might see in some other Toyotas and some Scions dating back a couple of years. Now, it is a 7-inch touchscreen, and the controls that are here seem to be pretty comprehensive. You've got tuning switches here, you've got a volume knob, that's always a good thing. But the problem I find here is the fact that it is a smaller screen in a space that can clearly accommodate something quite larger if they were to spend the money. And because of that, the buttons and the menus are a little bit more compact here. And so when you're navigating around with the menus, you do have to sort of use a little bit more focus and care compared to something that's got a much larger screen. The other thing is that the feature content here isn't anywhere close to that of many competitors. Here we do not have satellite radio standard, we do not have Apple CarPlay, we do not have Android Auto capability, and there is no nav here. And nav isn't available from the factory at any price, whereas if you look at Honda, if you look at Kia, if you look at Mazda, they all offer nav as a factory option, and in some cases in this very same price range where we are right here. Another item that I find actually quite curious is the way they've done the backup camera here. It's a standard backup camera, but instead of using this big screen that's already here, they put the backup image right up there in the rear view mirror. So the camera's back there, the wiring's here, but instead of just broadcasting that image here on the big screen where it's easy to see, they spent extra money and created this mirror up here that's got the image built into it. And so the problem with it is that, first of all, the backup camera image, the screen itself is very small. It's only about 2 inches, 3 inches wide. The other thing is during the daytime, as you can see here on my inset, when you're backing up and moving around with images, you actually get glare and reflections across that. You can't see it. So not only do you have an image that's difficult to see even at night, in the daytime it's almost completely unusable. And then you add that to the fact that when it does come on, it obscures 1/3 of your mirror. So if you really do just use that mirror instead of the backup camera, now you've got less mirror in addition to an image that you just can't see. Don't understand it. It sucks, to be honest with you. It's something that's been vexing me most of the week I've had this car, when there's already a big screen here that they could just as easily have thrown that image up on. So a little curiosity there. But you know, overall, when I rate this entire infotainment system, I really have to look at the fact that we've got poor visibility. There's glare here during the daytime. You've got small menus, so visibility's not that great. Audio, not the best in the world. It's not bad, but it doesn't really offer anything that somebody who's a millennial who listens to music might appreciate. It doesn't offer Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. It doesn't offer nav. So there's a lot of misgivings here that make it one of the weaker of the set competitively. So I put infotainment at 4 out of 5 stars. Now that we've talked about styling and all the interior bits and bobs, what's under the hood is the next part of the conversation before we get out for the drive. And here what we've got is Toyota's 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, and it's mated exclusively in this particular car with a CVT, continuously variable transmission. So generally behaving as an automatic transmission. There is not at this time a manual available, and here it's rated at 144 horsepower. So that is more horsepower than some in class, quite a bit less than others. And when I say class, I'm talking about specifically Kia Soul, Honda HR-V, pretty close. And when you start to go down the line and look at other vehicles, some offer more horsepower, some don't. Fuel economy here, 27 mpg city, 31 mpg highway, and 29 mpg combined is what the EPA says. So 144 horsepower and a continuously variable transmission. Not the thing that dreams are made of, let's be honest. And what I've been finding with my driving experience with this so far is, well, that's just the dead-on truth. This is a powertrain that doesn't have a lot of pizzazz. It doesn't have a lot of, well, backing up the styling that you see here. So when you look at this thing and you're thinking fun and fast, well, at least relative to the powertrain, no. This is a powertrain that we'd expect to find in a common grade economy car. Not a lot of power and a continuously variable transmission. That means that it doesn't have real gears. It doesn't feel like a transmission when it shifts because it doesn't shift. It's just one continuous rubber band type speed. Now, in its defense, I will tell you that it is one of the better CVTs out there. This is actually what Toyota calls the CVT IS, and what that means is it does have simulated shift points that you can access here using the manual shifter. So it gives you the sensation that you would get from doing some manual shifting. Not a bad thing at all. So if it's just something you have to have, that feeling like you have a traditional transmission, you can always download it. You can always access it. Now, when it comes to power, no, not a great deal, to be honest with you. This just doesn't have a lot of zoot. 3,300 pound car, 144 horsepower. That puts it in the crosshairs of the base powertrains you're going to find, for instance, in the Kia Soul, in the Honda HR-V. You're in the same range when it comes to how much power you're going to get. So is this thing at a big disadvantage compared to a lot of the competitors out there? Not really. And so my takeaway here is that even though this thing isn't all that fast, this is a powertrain that I find has some pretty good refinement to it. It's not overly noisy, it's not overly rough. This transmission, even though I'm generally not somebody that at all cares for a CVT, it seems to work pretty good. It's one of the better ones out there, so I don't hate it. Having especially spent a lot of time driving this car around the city this week, and my fuel economy biased a little bit more towards city driving, I actually achieved 29 mpg with it, which is exactly what it says for a 50-50 mix of driving. Not bad at all. So I achieved 29 driving mostly city. So if you did have a 50-50 mix, or if you spend most of your time out on the highway, you're probably going to see some pretty good numbers when it comes to fuel economy. So when it comes to my big takeaway, my overall rating on this powertrain, it's adequate. It's mediocre. Not bad, but it's class average. 4 out of 5 stars. Now, the topic of ride and handling. This is an area that I think a lot of people will be somewhat impressed. The CHR rides on Toyota's new platform architecture called TNGA. You're going to really be amazed at how imaginative this naming is. It stands for Toyota New Global Architecture. Somebody really got paid to come up with that. But while that's kidding, they probably didn't really get paid to come up with that name. The engineers probably did, because this is a chassis platform that actually has some driving character to it. It feels of quality, and that starts with a McPherson strut suspension, electric power steering, which is reasonably weighted, but most importantly, a nice double wishbone rear suspension. And so what that gives this car is a feeling of communicativeness that you get from the road. It gets a feeling of premium driving character that Toyotas just haven't had in the past. Let's be honest, I've owned Toyotas, I've driven Toyotas. Toyotas of the past, they're like dancing with somebody who's fast asleep. Just, that's a nice way to put it. They just didn't have that zing to them, that thing that said, drive me, drive me. This does. And this is the same platform that you find under the all-new Prius. It's the first Prius I've ever driven that was fun to drive. This is also under the new Camry. First Camry I've ever driven that was fun to drive, and it's under this car. And guess what? It's actually fun to drive, and this chassis isn't a disappointment. So while the powertrain isn't nearly as exciting as the styling might suggest, the handling and the overall ride, driving this around town and on the highway, is. So I'm pretty happy with the chassis. Now, is it perfect? No. It's not necessarily tuned for sporty driving. It's pretty soft, but it does fit the character of everything else. It's well balanced with the overall character of things, and it's a quiet ride out on the highway as well as around town here in my neighborhood. So chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. On the measure of quality, something very important to me, I really go over these cars with a fine-tooth comb and look at every little nook and detail to see how well they're put together. And so what we've got here is a Toyota, which generally means it's pretty well put together and very reliable, at least anecdotally, and consumer reports, places like that, you're going to find that these generally have, for the brand, good reliability. Now this one here is actually made in Turkey. We're starting to see more and more vehicles come to our shores that are manufactured in that country. They have a growing automotive manufacturing base there, and really, in my experience, I don't see any quality differences that might be attributed to that. Very much the same as vehicles you're going to find manufactured here in the United States, Mexico, Canada, perhaps even Japan. You wouldn't know it was made in Turkey just because, wow, you look at it and go, oh geez, not a bad thing. So that's why I point that out. Body panel fit and alignment, very good. Paint finish, excellent, just as good as any other place. And the materials overall here are very much in line with other Toyota products out there. Now, the one thing I'd point out is, just like other Toyota products, the warranty coverage isn't the longest in class compared to some of the vehicles out there that you might compare this to. 336 bumper to bumper, 560 for your powertrain. And even though it's a Toyota, you're likely not going to really care much about what that actual warranty coverage is. That is one of my measures. So quality comes in at 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, let's wrap it up for the Toyota CHR. The first thing I've got to tell you here is that I positively love this styling, and this color combination here just really does it for me. Since the first time I saw this car, I was just like, oh, I like that. So I like the car well enough, in fact, that it goes on my I'd buy it list for 2017. I really do like it that much. And we talked about some of the things that I don't like about this car, and it just goes to prove that a car does not have to be perfect for me to like it well enough to buy it and put it on my I'd buy it list. It's not a GTI. It isn't one. It's not a Kia Soul Turbo. It's not that either. But it is what it is. It's its own car, and I really do appreciate that. So there's that. Now, when we talk about things like value, we're looking at just under $25,000 for this particular car. XLE starts at $22,500, but we've got a lot of dealership accessories on this one. We've got an applique on the bumper. We've got that roof rack up there, a lot of little things inside, and this two-tone color combination on its own is a $500 option, so keep that in mind. So we're a little bit up from the base price. The XLE Premium, going to be in the same neighborhood, and that's about as high as this thing goes, really. So the one thing I would point out is, if you're shopping against a Kia Soul, for instance, for this amount of money, you're going to get something almost fully loaded there. You're going to get a panoramic roof, you're going to get heated leather seats, you're going to get a fully featured tech suite inside, among other things. And so there are other places to find value with the competitors that this doesn't offer at any price, leather seats being one of them. But you know, if this styling really speaks to you and you like the Toyota brand, then that is a pretty good value. But overall, when you put it in with competitors and what they offer out there, I put value at 4 stars. When you put that in with everything we've talked about, we're at 4 stars for the review. I'm Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. I hope you enjoyed the ride. All right, my friends, well, it just goes to prove that just because a car isn't a 5-star car on my rating system, it doesn't mean that it isn't perfect, or that it can't make it to the I'd buy it list, or more important, that it's not worthy to buy. It's just a scoring system. And that's the reality of things. Cars out there, none of them are ever perfect. Every car you look at that you want to buy, that you're looking at for yourself, is a compromise somewhere. And not everybody has the same list of ideals when it comes to their shopping for a car. Some people really put more weight on other things than some. And so, you know, I like this car well enough to buy it, even though the powertrain here isn't exactly what I'd love to have in a more sporty car. But in this case, the overall presentation, the styling, the fun factor of this visually, and the way it feels when you're just riding down the road in it, those are all compensating factors to the fact that this isn't a V8 with a 6-speed manual transmission. What can I say? There you go. Anyway, if you like the test drive you just saw, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking right there on the big round logo, or just see our latest test drive right there at the big square. Either way, stay tuned.